So you know what? Today it was announced that Joseph Parker versus Andy Ruiz will go ahead for the vacant WBO title. That's a good fight. It's a fight that we've discussed previously on the channel. There's an existing video on it, and it's a fight that we'll discuss again. Off the back of that fight being made, and shout out to everyone who got in touch to send me a link on Facebook or on Twitter. My social media details are in the description below if you want to add me on Twitter or Facebook. But off the back of that, it has been announced that David Haye, the Haymaker, will potentially have the chance to face the winner of that fight, the winner of Parker versus Ruiz for the WBO belt. So potentially David Haye will get a fight for the world title in the WBO rankings against the winner of Parker versus Ruiz. Now, my initial reaction was shock horror. How on earth can David Haye have his name in the mix yet again? And then it occurred to me that actually we shouldn't be surprised. Now, David Haye is a guy I've always been a fan of. He's a guy who I kind of love to hate, you know. There's been dramas over the years. There's been the Derek Chisora press conference fight. There's been the Vladimir Klitschko toe injury. There's been the pullouts against Tyson Fury, the pullouts against Manuel Charr, which was still the worst one for my reckoning. There's been the comeback fights against Mark, the Dominator Demori, against Arnold, the Cobra Giorgio. You know, there's the antics in the ring with Tony Bellew only the other day. You know, there's all this drama with David Haye. And it's easy to try and generate a dislike for him. But fundamentally, I have probably always been a David Haye fan and probably will always be a David Haye fan. I feel bad for admitting this, but I find the guy exciting. I find him an exciting persona outside the ring, and inside the ring I find his style, his punches, the way he operates to be almost uniquely exciting. He's a guy in the heavyweight division with explosiveness, explosive speed, explosive power, and he's got an explosive personality. And do you know what? Begrudgingly, it occurred to me this afternoon, and I stress begrudgingly, and with an element of tongue-in-cheek, but begrudgingly, it occurred to me, David Haye is a genius. Now, before you think I'm going mad, there's two reasons why I think he's a genius. And when I say genius, I almost mean of the sort of Floyd Mayweather business genius variety. I know he's made some questionable decisions outside of the ring, but in terms of the decision-making in boxing, from a pure business perspective, you've got to say it's fantastic. Let's look at the British heavyweights at the present. You've got a guy like Tyson Fury, who has had to vacate his belt, who's been inactive. You've got a guy like Anthony Joshua, who's perhaps the biggest star in British boxing, but recently has proved hard to match. You know, his team have made offers for Stiverne, Pulev, Klitschko, Hughie Fury, and none of these fights have come to be. You've got a guy like Derek Chisora, who was made to have too many hard fights too quickly and suffered back-to-back losses. And then you've got a guy like David Haye. You know, David Haye has somehow got himself arguably in the strongest position of any heavyweight in the planet. I'm serious. Think about it. Eddie Hearn did an interview with IFL today, saying that he understands David Haye has got a deal with Box Nation, that he understands David Haye is going to fight for some version of the vacant WBA title. Now the news breaks that David Haye has the potential to fight for a world title against the winner of Ruiz Parker. Supplementary to both of those world title opportunities that the guy has at heavyweight, he also has a multi-million-pound opportunity to fight a cruiserweight with limited defence on Sky Sports pay-per-view in a fight that, to my money, represents minimal, if not insignificant risk in the form of that mega pay-per-view showdown with Tony Bellew. My point is, how many other fighters out there have these options in front of them? David Haye, having been active for 4 years, having had fights against two opponents who you'd be hard-pressed to put in your top 50 at heavyweight, is in a position where he has the potential opportunity to fight for world titles with both the WBA and the WBO, or he could ignore both of those opportunities and take the huge money in a zero-risk fight against Tony Bellew. It is crazy when you think about it, how good a position that David Haye is actually in. You know, it's allowed him to be in such a good position that he hasn't even needed to take the fight with Shannon Briggs, which most of us thought was a fight that was en route to happening. You know, it's really, really bizarre. But why fight Shannon Briggs when you could fight even less of a risky opponent in Tony Bellew, in my opinion? Probably for more money on the big Sky Sports pay-per-view platform. You know, crazy situation. Now, if you look back at David Haye, obviously David Haye, you know, was a great cruiserweight. But in terms of his heavyweight career, you know, the way he has made money in low-risk fights is actually remarkable. And I know there's an element from a boxing fan of being frustrated about this, because obviously we want to see the big fights. But between his fights with Audley Harrison, John Ruiz, Mark Demori, and Arnold Gurjoy, how many millions has David Haye earned out of those 4 fights? How many millions of pounds has he earned out of those 4 fights? And out of those 4 fights, how many difficult moments was he in? You know, there was no difficult moments in the Gurjoy fight. There was no difficult moments in the Demori fight. There was certainly no difficult moments in the Audley Harrison fight. So, David Haye is proving almost a unique formula. His charisma and personality outside of the ring, his marketability with his image, his theme song, his appearances on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here and various other TV shows, and the style of fighting that he shows in the ring have really allowed him to fight at heavyweight and earn mega bucks for minimal risk. He's also got a style which means in riskier fights he doesn't really expose himself, and that, to be fair, deserves some credit from a boxing perspective. You know, Nikolai Valuev, Vladimir Klitschko, those were on paper tougher fights, and those were obviously fights where Haye lost to, you know, Klitschko. He won a very tight decision against Valuev, but in those fights, at no point was David Haye, you know, taking a beating. At no point was he getting hammered. You know, he's really, despite the fact he's 36 years old, despite the fact he's been on the scene for, it seems like, ages, and despite the fact he got stopped early on in his career, it's hard to say at this stage of his career that David Haye actually has that many miles on the clock, regardless of all of those injury problems he's had. So what I'm getting at is, I have a begrudging respect for David Haye. I hate to say it, I have a begrudging respect for David Haye for quite how well he has been able to manoeuvre and manipulate in this sport of boxing. And I'm afraid this is evidence of how marketability is everything in boxing. The WBO, the WBA, they obviously like the haymaker. They like the hype. They like the image. They like the fights. They like the excitement. They're open-minded to having him as their champion. They know that with David Haye comes money. They know that with money fights comes sanctioning fees. And they obviously like that. You know, he's ranked very highly in both of those divisions. But isn't it crazy that maybe they're not even the most attractive options to David Haye? I think he'll probably go down one of those routes. But, you know, he's also got a Tony Bellew option. He's also got a Shannon Briggs option. You know, come summer 2017, maybe the Joshua fight's there. Maybe the Tyson Fury fight's there. Maybe a Vladimir Klitschko rematch fight is there. You know, the money-making potential for David Haye is actually just getting started. 2017 could be the year of the haymaker. 2017 could be the year David Haye surpasses all of his previous career earnings. 2017 could be the year, don't rule this out, where David Haye becomes known as the #1 heavyweight in the sport. I'm not saying that I'm predicting that's going to happen, but the way this game pans out, Fury on the sidelines, Klitschko in his 40s, Joshua looking very, very good, but still a novice, Deontay Wilder looking very, very, very good, but still quite raw. Don't be surprised how this plays out. Don't be surprised if David Haye is the one who's left standing at the end of it. And I've got to say, love him, hate him, moan about him, disgusted at him. You know, he pisses me off half the time. But some of the moves this guy has made border on evil genius as far as I'm concerned. Let me know your thoughts, people. Let me know your take on this WBO situation. Let me know your take on this WBA situation. Let me know your takes on the Bellew and Briggs situation. What will David Haye do for his next fight? When will the announcement be made? What is the plan for him in 2017? Do all roads lead to Joshua? Could we maybe see a fight with Fury on the return? Who knows? If you've enjoyed this video, take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Many thanks for watching as always.